Hi, this is Tim Santoni and welcome to the Santoni Spotlight. Today I'm joined by Ron Brand. Ron, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get started, maybe tell the viewers a little bit about yourself, your practice, so we have a little bit of context for our interview.
Sure. So my practice is primarily labor and employment defense. I represent employers in all aspects of labor and employment law. And my practice has three buckets. The first bucket is compliance, making sure my clients comply with the various labor and employment laws. And part of that is they call me up day to day to find out how to deal with issues regarding hiring, firing, leave of absence, wage and hour issues. The second bucket of my practice is employee handbooks, employment agreements, contracts, policies, procedures. And the third practice is litigation, when my clients are sued for harassment, wrongful termination, discrimination, and I represent them in litigation.
Very good, very good. So, thanks for sharing a little bit about what you do and what your firm does, but maybe give our viewers a sense of how you got there, your progression, what led you to this point, in your career now.
Sure. So I went to law school in Chicago, and I practiced there for about 5 years at a general litigation firm. I did some employment law, and then I decided I wanted to move back to California. The winters were a little too much for me. When it gets down to -20 and there's ice that forms on the window, you realize, it's time to move back. And so I moved back to California, and I found a job at Fisher & Phillips, which is a national labor and employment defense firm, and I started doing just exclusively labor and employment law, and I realized that I really enjoyed it. I like the personal nature of employment law because you're dealing with something that's very near and dear to people's hearts. It's their job. In many ways, it defines who they are. And so I really enjoyed the personal aspects of doing labor and employment law, and that's what I've been doing since then. And a couple years ago, I decided to go out on my own with my brother, and so we joined up and created the Brand Law Firm a couple years ago.
Great, great. So, obviously you're working with employers and their employees on a day-to-day basis. Maybe give us a sense of the top 3 things that people are typically doing wrong, or they pick up the phone, they call you about, and you're like, wow, you're shocked or you're amazed that, they may be doing these practices that they need to be put in check.
Sure. Well, I would say one of the top areas now has to do with accommodating employees' disabilities. And the law is somewhat complex in terms of what employers' obligations are when an employee has some type of medical condition or disability that needs to be accommodated. And employers get confused about the interplay of different laws that apply and what the obligations of employers are to what's called engage in the interactive process. Sit down and actually talk with the employees and figure out what accommodations are reasonable or not reasonable, what the employers can or cannot do. And employers get tripped up in that area, and when they do, they get sued often for disability discrimination or what's called failure to accommodate, failure to provide some type of an accommodation so that the employee can perform the job. So that's one major area. Another major area is wage and hour compliance, dealing with overtime and minimum wage and meal breaks and rest breaks. And the laws are in that area also very complicated, and employers get tripped up. Those are kind of the 2 broad areas that I see.
So obviously we operate in California. We're in California. A lot of our clients are California based. I know there was about 96 new employment laws that were passed in 2018. There'll probably be more in 2019.
Yes.
As a lawyer who's trying to untangle and explain these to employers who are maybe not so sophisticated on the legal side, practically speaking, how is it you go about interpreting those and explaining them to a business owner from a practical business sense and allow them to kind of make a good business decision, if you will?
That's a good question. I try to take the major laws and distill them down into something they can understand, and I try to send out newsletters sometimes, and I will have conversations with HR directors at companies, and we just talk about the practical aspects of how to comply with the laws. And yeah, you're right. There are so many new laws out there. Even I sometimes have difficulty keeping track of all the new laws. Now, fortunately, a lot of the new laws don't apply to every industry. Some laws apply specifically to the agricultural industry, for example, which I don't do a lot of work in the agricultural industry, so I don't have to really deal with that. But there are some new laws out there. For example, the new sexual harassment law effective in 2019, where employers have to provide the training, anti-harassment training, to their supervisors, and now it's 5 or more employees, and they also have to provide sexual harassment training to non-supervisory employees as well. And so
It's a big one.
yeah, it's a big
That'll
one.
impact a lot of
It
employers.
will, yes, absolutely. Because before, if you had 50 or more employees, you only had to do sexual harassment training to supervisory employees. Now it's 5 or more employees, and you have to do training not only to supervisory employees, but also to non-supervisory employees as well. So it is burdensome to employers, absolutely.
So, you know, with all this interpretation, obviously, there's so many new laws coming up. I think that a lot of times, I mean, business clients are maybe afraid to, or HR directors are apprehensive, if you will, maybe afraid is not a good word, but apprehensive to reach out to a lawyer.
Right.
Maybe give an example of how you work with the client preventatively, proactively, where you know that, hey, it mitigated some risk and exposure down the road, whether it's your lawsuit, exposure, insurance claim, whatever else.
Right. Well, the biggest way to avoid a lawsuit is to be compliant with the laws as much as you can. And so I am very proactive in that. I always tell my clients, if you have an issue with anything, if you're concerned at all about what you're doing or not doing, please call me so we can talk about it, so we can head off any issues. And so I'm very proactive with my clients to tell them if something feels a little wrong or you're concerned about something, just call me and we'll talk about it, and maybe it's nothing, but if it is something, we can hopefully avoid any potential liability. I also encourage my clients to do training, where I do management training. I come in and I'll train the managers just in the top 10 areas that they need to be aware of regarding hiring, firing, leave of absence, just so that they can spot red flags when they come up, and that they will then know to go up the food chain and then ultimately come to me, and we can resolve problems before they turn into litigation. And so I found that if there's an issue with an employee and you deal with it in a civil, respectful, humane manner with the employee, even if the employee ends up being terminated, the chance of the employee suing is a lot less, because the employee feels like the employer at least tried to do the right thing and treated the employee with respect and dignity. So I always try to approach dealing with personnel issues in a respectful, dignified manner, with the ultimate goal of trying to avoid lawsuits. And look, you're also dealing with humans, right? You're dealing with people, and people who need to earn a living as well. So you have to have some degree of respect and dignity for the individual employee, with the ultimate goal of protecting my client from any type of costly, expensive litigation.
Yeah, that makes good sense, because I think that right at the end of the day, everyone wants to be treated with respect. And,
Yes.
and by having an attorney involved who's giving them that same respect, they feel like that they're getting a fair shake and that the employer's doing the right thing. Again, you can't control what people are going to do, and emotions get involved. They can do different things. But great. Well, Ron, before we let you go, we like to ask a couple of personal questions.
Sure.
So when you're not representing employers and dealing with litigation, where do you like to spend your free time?
Well, I enjoy hiking, and I enjoy playing music and traveling. My wife and I love to travel, and recently we've gone to the Cook Islands, Taiwan, Hong Kong. Next week we're going to Montana.
Nice.
So we enjoy traveling when we can, when my practice allows me to travel, and I have 2 sons,
Very
17 and 15. And,
Wow.
yeah.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, we'll definitely link up all of Ron's information in the show notes below. If you have a question for Ron, please leave it below. We'll make sure that we get a response. So thanks again for joining us on the show, and we'll talk soon.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank
Ron.
you.
Awesome.